How's it going, everybody? Today I want to tell you about one of the most annoying days that I ever had when I was in high school. Looking back on it, I actually am very fond of all these memories. But when I was there, it kind of sucked. So, let's begin. When I was a kid, I used to suffer from bloody noses. And I'm not talking about the cute little bloody noses that you see in the movies, where the main character gets socked in the face, and then he stands back up and he's ready for action, and there's a little bit of blood right here. It was nothing like that. There I am, I'm 9 years old, and I'm hanging out with my mother and my brother over at my grandparents' house. Well, we get finished up hanging out over there, and we start to head home. And on the way home, I had a very bad bloody nose. It was so bad that my mother pulled the car over and tried to get it to stop, but it was so much that it was actually coming out of my tear ducts. Now, I'm sorry about the graphic visual there, and if you're squeamish around blood, this story is not going to be for you. Now, this scared me because I was bleeding for about 30 minutes, and eventually my mother gets on the phone with my dad, and they're having a conversation about it. And I don't remember what it was my father said to my mom. It had to be something along the lines of, well, why is he bleeding so badly? And this is when my mother, on the phone, turns and looks at me. She's got tears in her eyes, and she says, "I don't know." She was so choked up, and the way that she said it told my little 9-year-old mind that this was a very big deal and that I was probably gonna die. Eventually, we headed back to my grandparents' house and they got me some ice, they put it on the back of my neck, and eventually the bleeding did stop and we were able to go back home. Now, these bloody noses, at least on this degree, were very rare for me. I'd get bloody noses about every season, but they were never that bad, maybe once every 4 years, if that. Either way, I'm 16 years old and I'm getting ready for school. I wake up and I actually skipped my shower this day because I'd stayed up a little too late the night before. So I'm brushing my teeth and I start to get a nosebleed. Now, I could tell that this was going to be a bad one. Some big burly asshole ghost socked me in the face, and this was ugly. Blood shot from my nose like I was a human sprinkler system, and it was everywhere. It had gotten all over my clothes, it had gotten all over my pants, it was all over the bathroom floor. It was coming out of my tear ducts. It was the worst bloody nose I'd ever had, and after about an hour, my mother actually called the paramedics to get them to show up and force the bleeding to stop. This was the only time in my life that a bloody nose was so bad for me that we had to call the paramedics, and after they showed up, it didn't take them too long for the bleeding to stop. Either way, they leave and everything is fine again, other than being a little lightheaded from being so tired and all of the blood loss. I go and I put on a different shirt. Now, I didn't have a lot of options at this point in time. The only shirt that was in my closet was a white shirt, and then I just threw on some jeans. When I finally got to school, I was a little bit late, but I told my first period teacher what had gone on, and she was like, okay, I'm not going to mark you for being tardy. Now, because I didn't shower this day, I was kind of keeping my distance from everybody. I'm the kind of guy who doesn't like to do anything unless I have my shower, and this morning was so hectic I never got a chance to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had deodorant on, but to me it just felt like it wasn't enough, so I was just in case, I was making sure to keep a wide berth away from people because I didn't want to offend. Now, for the most part, the day was normal. Everything was totally fine until chemistry class rolled around. Now, I liked chemistry. I loved playing around with different solutions. We would do in-house experiments and see how different compounds would react together, and we always had a good time. This one day, we had this class project that we were doing, and we had to be in pairs, which normally sucks because generally the teacher will pick your partner for you. Hey, Barry, I noticed you smell today, so why don't you go ahead and sit next to the prettiest girl in the class? Ugh. Since this class wasn't like that, though, I did get to pick my own partner, and I chose my best buddy, Nick. So we're sitting there, we're working on our experiment, and things are fine for about halfway into the period. So at about halfway through the class, our teacher gets up and he leaves the room, which wasn't normal, but nobody really paid much attention to that. In front of Nick and I were these two other students. One of them was this really shy, timid guy. I didn't actually even know him very well, so I don't really know his name. And then there was this other kid, a jock. He was a wrestler. He was a football player. His name was Eduardo, and he was a big dude. Well, as soon as the teacher leaves, Eduardo turns around to us and he starts talking to Nick and I about how he was in wrestling class earlier that day and how he performed the choker hold. And he was talking about how good he is at performing the choker hold. Well, he starts to come at me to demonstrate the choker hold, and I was sitting there babbling like an idiot, like, hey, actually, maybe it's not a really good idea to do that today. He goes, come on, Barry, quit being a baby, and he grabs me and he puts me in a choker hold. The last thing I remember is Eduardo's anaconda arms wrapped around my neck as the room gets dark. A few moments later, I wake up and I'm on the ground. I look up and there are students surrounding me. All of them look terrified. I look down and there's blood everywhere. Somehow it had shot with so much pressure that it missed my white shirt completely and all went onto my jeans. Eduardo looks down at me and holds his hand out to help pick me up. And when I got up, I saw he looked white. This was the most white I'd ever seen this kid. And I look around and I notice his lab partner, that really shy, timid guy, is on the ground passed out. Apparently, he thought I died and he fainted. At this moment, the teacher walks back into the room and all of the kids run back to their seats and they go sit down. I stand up and I walk towards the entrance and I notice the teacher looks up at me and then looks back down and then does a double take as I leave the room to go to the bathroom and try to clean myself off a little bit. When I got back, Eduardo wasn't there, the teacher was silent, and Nick told me what happened in those 10 seconds or so that I was out cold. Apparently, everyone thought that I was dead. Everyone thought that Eduardo had killed me, which looking back is kind of funny. His lab partner actually screamed out, "You killed him!" And then that's when he lost consciousness. After that, class was over and we all continued on business as usual. Now, you may think that I was pissed at Eduardo, and honestly, I wasn't. I mean, it was kind of annoying, but how was he to know that my face was going to explode? And from then on, he wasn't as aggressive with people. So there I am, it's my last class of the day, I have PE, and Eduardo shows up. He had tracked me down to apologize one more time for what he had done earlier that day. And I was like, dude, don't even worry about it, everything is chill. So we're playing football out in the field, and Eduardo decides to join in. He ended up on the opposing team, so all I had to do was make sure that I could outrun him. Now, this was the problem with that. Eduardo was on the football team. He trained every day. And every damn time someone got the ball on my team, Eduardo had them down in an instant. And when I say that Eduardo had them down, we weren't playing touch football. This was full-on aggressive tackle. They went to the ground. Well, either way, I'm right in the center of the field and the ball falls in my hands and I start running toward the end zone. As I'm running, I hear Eduardo sprinting behind me, and as I turn around, I notice he is covering so much ground. Judging the distance though, I was going to make it. All I had to do was run in the right direction, which surprisingly is what I was doing, and also not get tackled by this Hispanic Herculean that was right behind me. Everything was looking good. I was home free. Until this girl who was on my team runs right in front of me, stops, makes eye contact, and then just sits there. It was a total deer in the headlights. She was about 10 feet in front of me and time slowed down. At this point, I had two choices. I could try to avoid her, but in doing so, I would lose the edge that I had over this freight train that was right behind me, or I could plow into her full speed and try to make this touchdown. And that is exactly what I did. Now, I didn't just graze this girl. I hit her like I was busting through a wall. She spun in midair and then hit the ground, and I wish I could say that I made this touchdown and made it worth it, but unfortunately, that's not what happened. After I creamed her, I tripped over her now fragmented body, and I lost us the game anyway. This day was just one thing after another. I had blood all over my clothes, I transformed this once able-bodied girl into something that now resembled applesauce, and I still lost us the game anyway. Was I mad? Not really. I still didn't get tackled by Eduardo, and after the girl got back up, I could just pin the whole thing on him. Looking back on it, that day was one of the most adventurous and strangest days that I ever had in high school. I always wondered if Eduardo had gotten in trouble for what he had done to me that day. If maybe he'd gotten marked down in class, or if he got detention for choking me out in chemistry class, or maybe he had to be benched in the wrestling team for a little bit. To this day, who bloody knows?